All right, let's look at the second part of chapter 4, which deals with connective tissue. So connective tissue is our most abundant tissue type. So if we go to this picture, it lists a bunch of different kinds of connective tissue that we have. All right, so just like we did last time, let's look at characteristics of connective tissue. One is that connective tissue has a common origin. So they all arise from an embryonic connective tissue, a common embryonic connective tissue. And that's what this is showing. This common embryonic connective tissue is called mesenchyme. Okay? And this is kind of an added step in development. So that connective tissue has that other stuff doesn't. So it has this, step where it becomes mesenchyme before it becomes something else like bone or cartilage or dense regular or whatever. Okay? Let's move on to this is areolar connective tissue, but it shows some other things. So connective tissue, another characteristic is that it is vascularized, so it has blood vessels. There is an exception here, and that's cartilage. Cartilage lacks blood vessels, and this is why it's so hard for cartilage to heal after it's damaged. So think about somebody tearing their meniscus, they have to go in and get surgery to remove some of that damaged material. Next, the cells are separated from each other, and this is why I chose areolar. So here are the cells, and they're widespread apart here. All right. Next is there is an intercellular matrix. So inter means between. So the intercellular matrix fills the space between cells. All right. When we're looking at areolar, that's all these fibers here. If we're talking about bone, it's the bony material. If we're talking about cartilage, it's the cartilaginous material. If we're talking about blood, it's the plasma. Okay, so that's an intercellular material. Next, let's look at the functions of connective tissue. One, it provides structural framework for the body, so bone and cartilage there. It transports fluids and dissolved substances, so blood and lymph in that aspect there. Provides protection, so not just the skeletons around internal organs, but also like white blood cells or defensive cells. It supports, surrounds, and interconnects other tissue types. So areolar, adipose tissue does that. It stores energy, adipose tissue there, and defense against microorganisms, those white blood cells that I mentioned before. All right, let's look at cell types. One that we can see here, these are fibroblasts. So whenever you see blast on the end of the word, it makes what precedes. So fibroblasts are cells that make fibers, so cells that produce fibers. So this is a blow up of a fibroblast. Next are macrophages. So they're showing a macrophage. Macro means large, phage, as we already know, means to eat. So a large eater. These are large phagocytic cells. White blood cells are macrophages. Macrophages are former white blood cells. Now they're just in our body tissues. Next is a mast cell, which I don't have a picture of, but these are cells that cause inflammation, okay? So they also can cause allergic reactions. Next are chondrocytes. So if we move to this picture, this is showing cartilage here. So these cells here, those are chondrocytes. So these are cells that produce cartilage. Next are osteocytes. So osteocytes are bone cells. And there are two more specific versions of bone cells. One are osteoblasts, and so those are cells that make or produce bone. And the other are osteoclasts, and those are cells that break down bone. Lastly, that I'm going to mention here are adipocytes. So adipocytes, these are adipocytes here. These are adipose cells. They store fat. So the whole thing is fat, and the nucleus on those things are usually pushed off to the side, like you can see on that one. All right, let's look at, very briefly, some tissue types here. So one I've already talked about, let's go back to this picture here, is mesenchyme. All right, mesenchyme is the embryonic connective tissue, so what all the other tissue types arrive. Next is what is known as connective tissue proper. Okay, so connective tissue proper are things like areolar, adipose tissue, so areolar here, adipose tissue here, and then it's just showing some other ones, so regular, dense irregular, stuff like that. Okay. Next, let's look at cartilage. Cartilage is connective tissue in which cells are separated by a semi-solid matrix. All right. So this is showing hyaline, this is showing elastic, and this is called fibrocartilage. It's not one that you had to learn in Latin. All right. Now what we see with all these is they have these small cavities called lacuna, and the chondrocytes are within those lacuna. All right. Next is bone. This is showing compact bone. This is showing spongy bone. All right. Bone is connective tissue in which cells are separated by an inorganic solid mineral matrix. And so here, once again, cells are within lacuna. So there's a cell within the lacuna. Here it's hard to see that in the compact bone, but there is an osteocyte within those dark areas there. All right. Lastly is last one I'm going to mention is blood. And this is connective tissue in which cells are in a liquid matrix. So that's what we see here. Here are red blood cells. Those transport oxygen. Here are white blood cells. Here are platelets. Platelets cause blood clotting or coagulation. White blood cells don't look white. We have to stain them so that we can see them. Once again, those are defensive cells.